Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by First Federal Bank. It's Friday, June 17th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. The World Cup is coming to Kansas City. Wow. Years of dedication to this process by city and sports officials and politicians paid off in a big way with the announcement on Thursday that KC is one of the 16 cities in North America to hold World Cup games in 2026. There's plenty to be worked out, and on today's SportsBeat KC, star columnists Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam McDowell discussed everything World Cup. We get into why we think Kansas City was selected and what needs to happen moving forward, including the work on Arrowhead Stadium. Okay, let's get started talking World Cup in Kansas City. I went through the newspapers of the losing candidates for the World Cup 2026 today. So I was perusing the Denver Post and the Orlando Sentinel and the Cincinnati Enquirer, and not out of any kind of glee, a sense of glee or anything. I just wanted to see how they interpreted their the decision that FIFA made not to select those cities for the 2026 World Cup. And one thing I noticed that was kind of common to all those stories was the city officials and the sports officials in those places saying, we worked for 2 or 3 years trying to bring this thing to our city. And I thought, 2 or 3 years? Kansas City was on this thing as early as 2015, 3 years before the U.S. was presented given the joint bid along with Mexico and Canada. They beat out Morocco in 2018 for this. So I thought about that when I was reading your column, Sam, about who wanted it more. And it got me thinking too. The Kansas City just went all SEC on FIFA, right? Just means more, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, when it's all said and done in the final analysis, one reason you can say that the smallest media market of the 16 to get games is because it just wanted it more.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I wrote. Who knows? In the end, exactly what factor pushed Kansas City over the top. I mean, maybe FIFA eventually says why they selected each city. I doubt it. It's FIFA. But they did, Jake Reed, Sporting Kansas City's president, is the one who told us that every time they talked to him on the phone, they always said, well, no one wants it more than you guys. No one's more excited when we call than you guys are. And I think, that's probably a bit of a tell. I mean, they're the ones who keep mentioning it. It's not like, this Kansas City bid committee is the one who's saying, hey, we're the most excited about this. It's FIFA, the one that talked to every bid. So, yeah, I think that it obviously stuck in their minds. The question is, how big of a factor did it play? And like I said, I think the fact that they keep mentioning it to this group shows that they thought it was a factor. I think when a team is that excited, or when a bid is that excited, a city is that excited about it, you probably have a lot of confidence that they're going to pull it off and that they're going to do everything that they need to do to make it happen.
You just made me think of this. Oh, just to chime in real quick, Blair, Sam and I were talking about this a little yesterday, and that idea, Kansas City marketed itself as, the city of heart of America, heartland, all that. It just occurred to me, this really reflects that great Norman Rockwell painting, right? The Kansas City spirit, where I guess it's after the flood, where the guy's rolling up the sleeves and going, and I think it does speak to that. I love how you put it, Blair. Like, these guys are working 2 or 3 years. That's half the time Kansas City was putting into this, and I think we all had a pretty good sense of the man and woman hours being put into it too along the way, and some of the elements of detail. And so I do think I think Sam's exactly right. We don't know exactly how that influenced it, but we certainly know it didn't hurt, and we're glad that didn't become a punchline later, like, oh yeah, Kansas City really wanted it more, but like the old rental car ad, trying number 2 and not making it. And thank goodness for so many people that it prevailed.
I got to think too, maybe in the time that I've been here, the more than 3 decades that I've been here, it more often than not, being in a bi-state area with the conflicts that occur with trying to improve the metro area through each of the Missouri and Kansas governments is not always the easiest thing in the world to do, right? They both have their interests, and how every few years we're writing about how businesses are hopping the state line or being lured to the other state with tax breaks, some sort of financial advantages. But in this case, Kansas and Missouri, and all the municipalities in the metro area really had to pull together in a big way. This wasn't going to work without without politicians from both sides of the state lines and at state line, and the governor's offices in both states, and just having to, the Chiefs and the Sporting Kansas City, just all these entities had to work together as if there was not a state line, and we were just one single metropolitan area with one, under one flag. And I felt that happened in a pretty big way.
Also to your point, Blair, I can't help but think about this in these times. I mean, across state lines, across party lines. And I think that probably for our area, as you note, that probably has to happen for something like this to gain critical mass, or it's one hand clapping. I mean, you can't energize that the right way without having all of it.
I think what else that, can often happen in the group dynamic like that is a lot of people can wait on somebody else to do the work because the group as a whole is going to get the credit for it. And, I'm sure that there's a few people that did a lot more work than others. But, I think we all, in talking to people, know who those people are, but we heard some of those people speak yesterday and they didn't bring that stuff up. I think there are certain people who will know that they really did a ton of legwork to bring this to Kansas City. And those people will forever have this as their legacies and the jobs that they did to make this happen. Because this is the biggest sporting event in the world coming to Kansas City. The way that I tried to explain to people just how significant it is, when Patrick Mahomes won and the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, 100 million people watched that game. Over 3 billion people watch the World Cup every year. It's like 3.4 billion the last couple. And this will be the most watched tournament because there's going to be 48 teams in 2026. So it's going to be the most watched, the most attended tournament of all time in world history that's coming to Kansas City.
Coming to Kansas City. How about that? We all speculated that it was going to happen. Right. For me, I don't know about you guys, but for me, that didn't lessen the emotion that I felt in the aftermath. Just not just watching the celebration at the Power and Light District and seeing the joy on the faces of the officials and everybody else. But just, I don't know, maybe it's living here and being part of this. You pull for your town, right? You pull for your town. And how many chances you pull for your town when they're wearing, Chiefs colors or Royals colors or, whatever your college team you pull for. But this was a great opportunity just to pull for Kansas City, right? The city, the metro area, the state, Missouri and Kansas. And I think that, I got choked up a little bit when I saw the reaction.
Yeah, I'm glad you said. I'll just say real quick, Sam. Sorry, I'm glad you said that, Blair, because I didn't want to say publicly that you got choked up. But when we talked yesterday, you brought that up. Sam, you said this and wrote it in your column about getting chills. I definitely missed it up a little bit, and I think there is something about it being able to be a sort of unvarnished happiness for the result, right? I mean, it's about our city itself. There's no need for a filter about the showcase this presents, the all these things that you're talking about. So it's a weird thing as sports writers, because we're not, we're on the other side of the aisle. We're not fans, but you can just kind of bask in this even in our curmudgeonly roles.
Yeah, I mean, I anticipated being excited about it. I mean, selfishly, I think we all want to go to the World Cup and cover the World Cup, right? So I anticipated being excited about it for that reason. Being out in the environment at Power and Light, I think really just added an extra layer to it. I mean, seeing the reaction, that's when I got chills, just because it was very genuine. And, I mean, I'm from Kansas City, so I couldn't help but think that, I mean, when I was growing up, Power and Light wasn't even a thing. I mean, the T-Mobile Center across the street wasn't a thing. So I mean, this city itself has just really embraced the growth of downtown. And it's still, not even close to where these other cities that were picked, right? I mean, we all go to those other cities, and it's a much grander scale. But growing up here, you always kind of felt like I mean, Kansas City had this attitude of you've got to prove that you belong with all those other cities that were mentioned yesterday, and it felt pretty cool to actually belong. FIFA announced that Kansas City's part of this group.
It really hits me that way too, Sam. I mean, it's a sort of the old cliche about the sense of punching above your weight. And you look at our metropolitan size. I didn't get to confirm this, but I know somebody had posted yesterday that we're, I think, 33rd largest metropolitan area, something like that. And
yeah, in the U.S., right?
That's, I think, Blair, when you were starting to talk about the coverage in other cities, I was waiting for you to say, not so much why not us, but why Kansas City? that there'd be a little bit of that. And a couple of the news stories I read emphasized basically that Kansas City got it, but X didn't. Without saying more than that, the implication is, well, how, why? And, we have a little sense of why, but I think it is a wake up sensation, I think, for those who don't really have a sense of the pulse of Kansas City.
I mean, what are you thinking if you're Washington, D.C.? For the nation's capital. Blair mentioned this 2 days ago that, it's going to be 250 years since the birth of America when this tournament comes around, and the capital is not part of this bid. And if you are a citizen of DC, a huge soccer fan in DC, you have to be saying their city, their bid took this a lot more seriously than our bid did. If Kansas City is getting this and we're not.
Yeah, or maybe they figured they got the 250th anniversary stuff covered with Philly. But one way or another, it reveals a strange deficiency.
Well, and look, DC is a great soccer town. It is. I mean, they original MLS team.
They used to have all kinds of MLS Cups there.
Right.
The MLS Cup used to be like the Super Bowl where it traveled to random sites, and DC had a few of them.
No, it is, Vahe, you and I have talked about how St. Louis was kind of an original soccer city in the United States. Washington, D.C., just because of its international, presence, that soccer has always been important in D.C. What killed D.C.'s bid was the stadium, and the city and Baltimore, which bid separately, had to scramble to combine their bids a few months ago, and I don't think FIFA liked the uncertainty. I think that played into a couple of the losing bids. Just a little bit of uncertainty. Nashville stadium situation is part of that, but the other so the 2026 World Cup will include a national capital, and that is Mexico City, but it won't include Washington D.C. And there's only been 2 other World Cups in history that didn't include the nation's capital in playing games.
Wow.
So this will be the third. But
I see where FIFA says there will be a fan fest there, but I suppose that's a little consolation right now to that bid committee and soccer enthusiasts there.
Well, true confessions and a little bit of how the sausage is made. Yesterday, I had to write 2 stories in anticipation of the decision. One is if Kansas City got the World Cup, and one is if they didn't. And the lead on the story about Kansas City not getting the World Cup was the consolation prize of, being a base camp and maybe having a fan fest, but having no games. I think you're right. I listened to the FIFA press conference afterwards, and the FIFA officials said Washington, D.C. will be part of the World Cup. They will have a fan fest on the mall, and so there is that, but it's not the same. It is absolutely not the same as having games. So,
which one was your better story, Blair? Because that's probably what you were rooting to happen.
It's amazing how many Pulitzer type stories we've all got written that had to get scuttled.
People say we don't root for teams, but man, when you write two stories, you're rooting for one or the other.
All right, let's take a break and talk about what we think is coming to Kansas City.
Buying your first home is a huge milestone, but the journey there can be confusing. First Federal Bank of Kansas City is here to make it simple. After nearly a century of serving the KC community, our loan advisors have experience in every type of housing market. With a short phone call, we can give you a free rate quote and talk through loan options. No pressure, no obligation. The road to home ownership can be simple with First Federal Bank. Get started with a free quote at ffbkc.com/homes. First Federal Bank of Kansas City, because banking is personal. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There is Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all of the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening.
All right, we're back on SportsBeat KC talking World Cup 2026. It's coming to Kansas City, and I'm here with star columnists Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell. All right, guys. There's a World Cup to play before the World Cup in 2026. 2022 World Cup is happening in November and December in Qatar, or I hope by the time it arrives in November that I learn how to pronounce it correctly, because I continue to hear pronunciations in several ways. Do we have a consensus on that, by the way?
I don't know, but I'm glad it's not quite the same problem we get with the planet Uranus and the other way it's pronounced. Those are two that bug me. I really want it to be Qatar. And maybe we can just declare star style on close this down.
I would root for Qatar because it's just cool. But I always say Qatar.
Well, we'll get it figured out. Hopefully by November. Which one of you guys are going, by the way?
Just going to ask you.
I think Pete should go. He wrote a really good column about his first person experience going to the two different World Cups, and he's obviously able to produce good content when he goes. So I think Pete ought to go.
I'd like to see us load up McClatchy one and take a little charter over there, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But it would be great to be on the ground there. But I think what will be fun and interesting for Kansas City is I do think I don't know this, but I would assume that there'll be a lot more eyeballs on it than there might have been in the past here, just because of now a different sort of curiosity.
Yeah, and falling in the middle of the NFL season too. That's interesting for the first time ever, and the only time because of the heat in the Middle East. So I think it falls, at least the USA games fall in the stretch where the Chiefs are playing LA teams. Don't they play like the Chargers and the Rams in back-to-back weekends and in late November around Thanksgiving? And I think the USA team will play in Qatar then. So, all right. So what does Kansas City have to do to be ready for this thing? Let's start with Arrowhead Stadium, Sam. There needs some the Arrowhead Stadium that will include Chiefs, the home of the Chiefs for the next few years, at least in the summer of 2026, will look a little different.
Yeah, Vahe actually asked Mark Donovan about that because we've heard a lot about the fact that they'll have to like cut seats out of all four corners to make the dimensions right. And Mark Donovan spoke about the challenge that's going to be, because that sounds, I mean, when you say it, it's pretty simple. Well, you just got to cut out some seats, but the way he described it was it would be every off season you work on it, then you've got to go back for the Chiefs season, then you got to work on it again the next off season, then you got to go back for the Chiefs season all the way to 2026. So it certainly did not sound like the easiest of processes the way he was describing it. And I could actually tell by watching him talk about that he was a little anxious about the process that's gonna come over the next 4 years.
Yeah, he used the word challenge like 5 times, and I think we know there's a couple elements to it that we sort of know, right? That the seats, field has to be essentially expanded, and I think, I'm not sure if elevated is the right word, but the whole thing about the pitch is to have absolute conformity. And I seem to remember, Blair, maybe from our long talks with Catherine Fox, now Holland, and Kathy Nelson about how that has to be generated. That's its own thing. This is a side point for another broader discussion, really, but I think merits bringing up right now that part of the follow-up question somebody asked Mark was about how this affects, I don't know if it was phrased this way exactly, but it yielded an answer to how it affects the future of Arrowhead. And Mark sort of spoke to something that I think we've all kind of sensed for a little while, that with discussion about the future of Arrowhead already in the wind, now you're talking about millions and millions. I think he used that term, maybe tens of millions, but I think he said millions and millions to get this set this way. And so that he acknowledged basically there'll be discussion about, well, are we going to spend all that money to get it back that way? Or how are we going to do that? I took that as sort of another statement about the assessments they're going to be making about both the viability and the approach to the future of Arrowhead, also partly in the context of what the Royals end up doing.
Right. Is this going to be the beginning of the transformation of the Truman Sports Complex? Right.
Yeah.
Because I think we're pretty, I don't know, we're not 100% sure, but kind of confident that the Royals will end up downtown sometime, whether it's before 2031 when the lease expires. And but does this hasten the Royals' decision to move downtown? Can they start and maybe have their stadium built by 2026 so that when the World Cup comes and goes after that, the Chiefs can have that space for themselves at the Truman Complex? Is that a possibility?
I think it's. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I definitely think the Royals would like to move sooner rather than later. I mean, the biggest hurdle now is going to be, when you've got a team barreling towards 105 losses, trying to convince this city that it's a good idea to spend their tax dollars on a new stadium. I think that's going to be a hurdle that the Royals have to pass whenever they put it on the ballot. Kevin Hardy and Mike Hendricks wrote a really good story that looked at what the Royals are trying to do and when they're trying to do it. And that there was discussion about putting it on the ballot this year, even at one point. So I really wonder if the Royals are going to try and time that to where things with the major league team are going better, because listen, this is a stadium for the future of baseball. It shouldn't really matter how this year's team is doing, whether or not you want this stadium. I just don't think that's how reality is. I do think people look at how this year's team is doing and their excitement towards, putting tax dollars toward that.
And, just a little separate point, but the Royals certainly are making a case that they're not able to compete in these circumstances right now. What I don't understand fully is the economics of how they might present a case that a new stadium would enable that to be better, right? That's sort of the pivot point here. We've heard, I think Dayton speak to that a little bit, but only in general terms about, what the financial benefit of this will be. But the only part they're demonstrating right now is that they're not able to compete at this time.
Emphatically.
I don't know if that's the strategy, but seems like they may need to put up a few different pillars to it.
We always use this line, but maybe they are going with the "I can't work like this" strategy.
I can't work this way.
I wonder if somehow the Royals' new stadium and Arrowhead improvements will somehow fall on the credit card receipts of World Cup visitors to Kansas City in 2026, and having people from Argentina and France and Korea, with a tax on, just maybe a one-time thing for hotels and restaurants in Kansas City.
Yeah,
I think that's a really astute point. And, I have to think in some way, some of the stuff will be funneled.
I'm sure that's being discussed. I mean, I don't know if that's what ends up happening, but, I'm confident that that aspect has been discussed. But that brings up, the games coming here is just awesome. And it's the number one thing I think we all wanted. I think the base camps are going to change like most what Kansas City looks like over those few weeks. Because what fans generally do is they stay where the team is training. Not, they fly out along, they basically travel with the team. The team goes and plays, and LA, they'll travel from Kansas City, LA and back, because that's the way the team does it. And so whichever base camps come here, because I'm confident at least one or two teams will be training at that state-of-the-art training center, which I was notified. I initially called Pinnacle because that's what it was at one. That was like the second iteration. Now we're on the third iteration of Compass Minerals. Let's say Belgium comes here or something. I think we're going to see a lot of Belgians in Kansas City, and it's going to be a really cool element because they're going to take on our culture, but we're going to take on a little of their culture too in the process.
That's a great way to put it, Sam. I think that's really cool. I keep thinking of it. This is our opportunity to present ourselves, but I've thought about this other part that you just stressed too. I mean, it will be engulfed in different cultures. And I think to elaborate a little bit on some things, I think you asked Blair too. I don't know how many base camps we could possibly be, but I know there are, schools from certainly within a 60, 80 mile radius that are equipped and interested in holding base camps that have the facilities. The other thing I think we should expect, probably, as I recall, more than a month out. So we're talking about a good couple months of it being like this, are security perimeters being put up around maybe the whole Truman Sports Complex, or maybe it's mostly just Arrowhead, certainly around wherever they finally established FanFest to be, which would be in, I suppose it's down to either that Union Station World War I museum area or the Nelson Atkins lawn. But I bring that up to note that there will be some inconvenience to, the way people expect things to be, the way things usually are. But I just think, we'll get more educated on that, and hopefully we can educate our audience more on what to expect as it comes.
That is a good point, because I've said a few weeks a couple of times, but the teams do come early and train, and often they'll have friendlies too, leading up to the World Cup to get a game in or something. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility you could see a friendly at Children's Mercy Park or something like that, just as a tune-up for the World Cup.
Some things we can provide some information on. I remember after the announcement yesterday, a lot of people were asking about like tickets and the draw. And so as Sam mentioned earlier, it's going to be for the first time a 48 nation field. We know 3 of the teams that are going to be in that 48 team field, the US, Mexico, and Canada, as the joint hosts. They get an automatic berth into the field, so they're not going to have to win through CONCACAF qualifying to get in, although all 3 did this year for Qatar. The draw for the 2026 field will happen anywhere from 6 to 8, 9 months out. So we're not going to know a bracket until the year of the event, or maybe the late in 2025. this year for the games in November and December, the draw was April 1st. When the U.S. held the World Cup in 1994, the draw was in December for games that were played in June and July. That's when you know what the groups are. Because it's a 48-team field, you're going to have 16 groups of 3, and then but the 2 winners will advance out of those groups to a 32-team knockout stage. And Kansas City probably in line for a knockout stage game, a handful of group games, 2 or 3 or 4, a 30, a knockout round of 32, maybe a knockout round of 16, and as maybe as deep as a quarterfinals, we could see a game at Arrowhead Stadium, which would be pretty cool.
The bracket thing that you mentioned, Blair, is going to be really weird for scheduling. And maybe I'm getting too off track here, but when you have groups of 4 like you do coming up in Qatar, it's easy. A plays B and C plays D on the same day. And then you get different teams playing each other. When you've got a group of 3 and you've got to kind of wait on one that's just played, so you've got an adequate time. I do kind of wonder how the scheduling is going to work out as far as how that applies to Kansas City. Do we get all 3 teams in one group? I don't know that that's the case. Usually you get all 4 teams in one group playing in a similar spot. So I think that's what could be a lot different. We might just get 2 of the 3, and we might get 2 of the 3 from another group, and so on.
Yeah, keep in mind that the last time the USA was in this thing was in 2014 when it was in Brazil, and the U.S. team, which included Graham Zusi and Matt Beasler, they didn't play in the same city twice. They played all 3 of their group games in different cities, and then they reached the knockout stage and lost. But that was in a 4th different city. So. Yeah.
Traveled more than any other team did that World Cup. Graham reminded me of that whenever I spoke with him 2 days ago. I think that's still a sore spot for that team.
You just made me think of this. I hadn't thought about this before. Will it be by design or only coincidence if a team has a base camp in the city where it plays games?
I don't know that they used. I mean, I know that the U.S. did not do that in the year Blair's talking about, which is the last time the U.S. has played in the World Cup because they missed it in 18. So I don't know if that's avoided because it seems like an unfair advantage. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Just hadn't pondered that. I mean, yeah, because it'd be interesting. The reason I think of it is, all right, let's say Brazil's here and also playing games here, and how much does that become, like, to your point, is it an unfair advantage? But also, how much more does that get Kansas City engaged with that country? I mean, if they're, depending on who they play, of course. I
mean, I think the big question everyone probably wants to know is the U.S. going to play here?
Yeah.
I kind of think that would be a little bit of a long shot if they played one of their 3 group stage games here. I mean, they certainly have some fields around the U.S. that they've kind of used for some of their big qualifying matches. We often get friendlies. I think that's an indication that it's probably a long shot for the U.S., one of the U.S. games to be here.
I wonder if they'll spread the U.S. in 2026 across give them one region each, right? A game in the West, a game in the Central, and then a knockout game in the East. I don't know. There was a reason that they announced and separated them in those regions. Really did feel like an NCAA basketball March Madness announcement. What's going to happen, I'm pretty sure, is teams that will play in Kansas City, it will stay in the region just for travel, to ease of travel. So we'll take Belgium. If they have a game in Kansas City, their next game likely would be in either, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, which was in the central region, or the 2 Mexico cities, Monterrey or Mexico City. And so I just think for the ease of travel for the teams and the fans, the teams in group stages will stay in the region. And teams in the East, teams in the West, and teams in the Central. So
that was a surprise to me. Maybe you guys knew that, but I didn't. I didn't expect it to be so NCAA tournament-like. I thought we were kind of joking about it the other day, but for them to go by regions, I didn't see that as how the whole field would be unfurled. I just didn't know that was coming that way.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew the manner in which they were going to announce it. Blair makes a really good point, though, because something that's going to be an element at play that really is not as much at play during a normal World Cup. I mean, when you take South Africa in 2010, for example, the sheer size of having 3 pretty large countries host a World Cup travel's going to be an issue for a lot of these teams. And you do wonder if Blair's example is right, if they want the U.S. playing in one region, maybe the U.S. could train here. I mean, their primary training sites out in California. If they're playing out in New York or Boston, I don't see them wanting to train out in California before that. And obviously, I always call it Sporting Kansas City's training facility, but it's a U.S. national training center as well.
I read this that in '94, as successful as the event was in the United States with attendance and interest and all that, nations complained about having to fly from West Coast to East Coast, back to West Coast. And then I think that's how we got the region set up that we did. So it'll be interesting. And we won't know this. We just won't know the schedule and the setup for years. So.
But Blair, this reminds me, and I think I've read it differently elsewhere, but I think in our conversation with the Sports Commission and the bid committee last fall, I hearkened to that because it was a good couple hours. I think the map they showed us, or certainly the way they outlined it, was hotels within a 4-hour, 5-hour radius. I mean, we're talking about St. Louis, Omaha. Tulsa's not quite in that range, but I think on into Oklahoma, all blocks put aside for this. And that's obviously because they expect a significant amount of base camps in the area too. In terms of the fans following, the base camps.
Yeah, what did we hear that when the U.S. played Uruguay a couple weeks ago, right? That how many fans, thousands of fans came up from, including people who drove, to be here. That's incredible. So
that's like a Kerkhoff style drive, good 30 hours and just getting momentum.
Cowboy up, let's just go. All right, we're gonna have a lot to say about the World Cup in 2026 with Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian over the next weeks, months, years even. How cool is that? Guys, enjoy the conversation, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today and this week on SportsBeat Kansas City. Thanks to our staff of Monty Davis, Randy Mason, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett, and a shout out to our sponsor, First Federal Bank. Their website is ffbkc.com. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell for sharing their insights. Today's morning sports edition was crammed full of good stuff about the World Cup selection, the Golden State Warriors' victory over the Boston Celtics for the NBA championship, the first round of the U.S. Open, and much more. Go to liveedition.kansascity.com for more information. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC.